Hello and welcome to the latest Blood Red podcast. I am your host Stephen Killen, and today we are going to be looking at all things Liverpool pre-season and transfers, as it has been the case for the past few weeks now. But before we get started, I'd like to thank our sponsors, NordVPN, for sponsoring this podcast. And to get the best discount off your NordVPN plan, go to nordvpn.com/bloodred. Our link will also give you 4 months extra on the 2-year plan, and there's no risk with Nord's 30-day money back guarantee. And the link is in the podcast episode description box. And let's get into things. Firstly, Ian, how are you?
I'm okay. I thought you were going to get through that without a stumble, but
No.
I think we're going to let you have that one, yeah.
Yeah. Weather's been nice.
Has it? I don't know. I've been stuck inside doing work all weekend.
Part of the job. And Theo, how's things with you?
Yeah, all good. I've just had a week off in Tenerife. I actually used NordVPN pretty much all week. Used it to watch the F1 from abroad, and then had it on my phone as well to make sure I didn't get hacked or anything, because it kept warning me that my network wasn't safe. So yeah, the sponsor's coming up, Trump's once again.
No local English bars showing the F1?
I was in a small part of Tenerife. I think there was one bar and we couldn't be bothered going down to see it. We just watched it on the laptop.
No holidays for me, just slip and sliding when it was sunny for about 10 minutes yesterday. But obviously we're here to talk about Liverpool, not holidays. Paul Gorst is on holiday to some degree.
I can guarantee you he is not on a holiday in the United States.
But he had to be up very early today.
Yeah. But the big story in the last 24 hours is regarding Wataru Endo. Ian, I'll pass over to you. What do we know so far?
Well, we know that Liverpool had an offer from Marseille, which was about 11 million, probably just under 11 million pounds, which Liverpool rejected. And that would seem the end of that, except, of course, this being the transfer window. I don't think that's the last we're going to hear of all of that kind of thing. I mean, I've just written a piece, actually, which has just gone online, and it depends on how you view it. You can say Liverpool rejected a bid for a player they don't want to sell, which is fair, because they've obviously not got many defensive midfielders. However, everybody in the world knows Liverpool haven't got many defensive midfielders, so why on earth would a club come in and try and buy one of them? The only one, the senior one they've got available. And probably the reason for that is because everybody in the game probably also knows that Liverpool are looking for one. So, Endo himself came out, didn't he, at I think it was June, where he said that, look, I hope we do get somebody in because we need more competition for places in my position. We've got. He mentioned actually, didn't he, Pasetic, and said that he's a young lad coming through, but he is a young lad coming through. He hasn't hardly played for the last 18 months, and I think, as I mentioned a few times now, he's only ever started 2 Premier League games, a defensive midfielder. So while he could conceivably be the future for Liverpool, he's not the future for any time soon. He'll get minutes and he'll play loads of games, I would suspect, of the coming season, but he can't be held responsible, have the responsibility for being a defensive midfielder. Now, the other thing on top of that, which we mentioned again, I think we mentioned it last week, is that who's to say that Slot's going to play with just the one number 6? By all accounts, at Feyenoord, he liked to play with 2, or if he did play with 1, it was never what you call like a destructive defensive midfielder, and he likes people who are a bit more technical in that area. And of course, Liverpool have got a lot of options, people who can play that. We've been through this quite a few times, but it's quite clear that they do need at least one person who's capable of doing that, because we've seen with Man City and Arsenal with Rodri and Declan Rice, and I know that Rice spent a fair amount of the season playing as not so much as a number 6, but possibly a bit of a number 8, or in between a 6 and an 8. Not necessarily number 7 though, but you saw the difference that made for them. That's probably where Liverpool fell short, certainly towards the end of the season, because Endo was just tired, and you saw that when he did play particularly well in some games, but when he wasn't there, it was notable. And so Liverpool have rejected the bid. I would expect if Marseille don't come back in for him, there might be somebody else between now and the end of the transfer window. If I was Liverpool, I'd keep him, because you still need, if you've got a new player coming in, you still need them to adapt. But maybe if it's a matter of Liverpool bidding, instead of 45 million for a player, 60 million, and use the money you get for Endo to buy this player, then perhaps that might be the way it ends up. But that's just surmising. And the only thing we do know is that Richard Hughes, when he said at the start of this month, don't expect much to happen until the end of July and early August. And look, July the 29th, and things just finally starting to happen. So perhaps people should pay notice of when a sporting director, Liverpool sporting directors don't really tend to say very much, historically. I mean, they've only had one for about 10 years, haven't they, really, in that position, but he's the first one that's ever held a press conference. When he says something and it's reported, perhaps people should believe what he said.
And Theo, Ian alluded to it there about selling him, and I think I've seen a poll on Twitter. I'm not sure whether it's just a case of fans getting excited because it's the first big transfer news, like, right, get rid of him straight away. Where do you sit on the fence in terms of, should Liverpool get rid of this 31-year-old Japanese international, or should they keep someone who can actually offer experience in a department, especially, which is relatively depleted if you look at in terms of the options?
Well, it depends who's available on the market. If they can get in a high quality option who's going to be your first choice, then there's an argument to move Endo on if you can get your money back. Because if you want to give him game time, or you want to give Basetic game time, you would lean towards the younger option, so he can be that long-term project. But then you always need a bit of an experience in your squad and a leader. Like when Endo was signed, he was essentially a James Milner replacement, wasn't he? He was brought in to sort of see out games. It just so happened because he was the only natural player in that role. He made the starting place his own eventually when he got his feet under the table, settled to English football. And he did have a really good first season, and yeah, toured off a bit at the end, but I think it did for most of the squad, didn't it? You think when the injuries across the board were taking the toll and they just ran out of steam. So maybe he'll find his feet a bit more this year when they've got players back like Basetic, when you've got McAllister as an option. So many midfield options there as well, and they're going to do more of a two. Well, then Jones could play alongside him, so it's not quite as much of a strain, or a Szoboszlai, Gravenberch. There are plenty of players there that they can share the workload. But it just depends to what happens here. Like financially, making your money back on a player who's 31, who you probably didn't envisage selling so quickly, having not thought you were going to bring him in the first place when he was a very left field signing. It makes sense, but you've still got to weigh up the squad. It's part of the reason why they've not signed anyone yet, because it's a new head coach, a new sporting director, and they're assessing their options. They're looking at who they've got and waiting for the internationals to come back, seeing who can play where, who might want to leave, and then seeing what they can bring in, who's available on the market. So yeah, if you can get a really good holding midfielder, then it makes sense to move him on. The same as if they'd got Caicedo last year, they wouldn't have signed him in the first place. He was a good makeshift signing for the season, but it's a big difference when you know you've got a year in Europa League to a year in the Champions League. So if you want to be really challenging with City and Arsenal, you don't really want him to be your first choice. Fine as a squad player, so it's just wait and see how the next month of the window pans out.
And Ian, especially when you look at Liverpool in the past, they tend to, the preference is the young player with a good bit of Premier League experience behind them. In terms of the holding midfielder in the Premier League, you will be paying a premium, won't you? And that's the danger of if you're going local within the means.
Yeah, but I mean, everybody knows that anyway with Liverpool. Is that's why Endo was such a surprise, and the only way they could afford a player at that price was to get someone at that age and that experience. He ended up probably being, as they said, more successful than people probably thought. So, but what it did underline for me is that they do actually need a defensive midfield. You've seen with Fabinho where he tailed off for large parts of the previous season, the 22-23 season, and then ended up coming back a bit strong towards the end. But I think everybody knew by that point that his kind of race was running. He literally couldn't run anymore. Not that he was ever the fastest in the first place.
It's the Brighton yellow card, wasn't it, in the FA Cup game when he should have been sent off.
And then you've got, we mentioned Henderson, Milner, all of them, right? But Liverpool have just had to restock, and again, it comes down to what we think or what Slot wants to do. Not what we think, but what we think Slot thinks he wants to do. So he needs to have a look at the squad, as we've just said. And I know people will be watching this going, yeah, you've been saying this for like weeks and weeks. Well, because it's the truth. It's like, why are you knocking down these transfer rumours? Well, because they're not true. Why haven't they signed anybody? Well, because of the thing that the manager said. Sorry, I've done it again. Head coach said. That's what the sporting director said weeks ago. Everything's happened exactly the way that they said it would. The interesting thing now is that we're now reached the point, and we've seen this, just mentioned before, with this Endo offer, is that now we're going to start seeing things happening. When they come back from America, which will be this time next week, they'll be back, and they'll all be back. Everybody will be back, so they'll all be there, and then you can sit down with each and every player and go, right, this is what I think, and then it's up to them whether they go, right, I'm on board or I'm not on board. And
with Nord.
Well, are they with Nord or not? And then decisions will be made accordingly, because don't forget that there'll still be 3 and a bit weeks left of the transfer window. That's still loads of time. If you look at how quickly Liverpool got the Endo deal done last year, and to be fair, to a certain degree, Szoboszlai and McAllister, I mean, they left it till the end for Gravenberch, but that was always going to be one. They were always thinking about that one. But it would just be interesting to see. And the fact is, if you look around, teams now are just starting. See, United are starting to buy a few. City haven't really done a lot yet, have they?
They've got in the lad from the sister club,
yeah.
in Savinho.
Arsenal, what have they done? They signed
Raya,
isn't it? But they'd already had him.
Yeah.
But there's only now. I don't think Smith Rowe's not gone to Fulham yet, has he officially?
But Fulham have signed someone.
This in the last day or so.
Yeah, I think they've signed someone. You can Google it. You've got the laptop.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
I'm pretty sure they signed someone.
Well, the point being is that when I wrote,
they got Sessegnon back.
Oh, there you go. So basically, there's only Liverpool that haven't signed a player for this season coming. So they're going to sign somebody. The manager said it in. I've done it again. The head coach said it in America. He said press conference ahead of the Betis game, wasn't it, on last Thursday? Yeah, he said that it would be a surprise if there weren't more new faces. So he's obviously planning for it.
And it did happen very quickly with Endo. Like, you ought to remember last year when they had the friendly at Preston and they went to Chelsea, there was a lot of talk about holding midfielders there, with the bids in for Lavia, Caicedo, and I think we probably wrote in both our pieces after those games, they need a number 6. They can't let this roll on and on and on. And they got one in after, the first week of the season, and there's still a bit of uncertainty there because he was such a left field signing, Endo. But he did start to come into form, didn't he, once he got his feet under the table. And McAllister found form as well. So, like, Liverpool, when they weren't in an ideal situation last year, they made the best of it and it worked for the majority. And they're in a healthier position this year because they've got a few extra weeks to work with it. I think there's only really so much of a hoo-ha about it because you've had the same manager for 9 years and they've had such stability where supporters have got used to the players come in early. You get your transfers done early. Everyone's there for the most of pre-season and you're ready to go. You're not used to a manager, head coach coming in and having to assess a squad, assess players and make late decisions, having to act late in the transfer window because it's new and it feels so un-Liverpool because they haven't done it for a decade. It feels chaotic and like they don't know what they're doing, but they're just having to deal with a different set of circumstances.
If there's one club who knows all about all the defensive midfielders out there, it's Liverpool. They've spent the last 2 years trying to buy one, so they must surely know the ones that are available, the ones they can get.
And maybe it's not necessarily like an opportunity missed, but obviously last summer when they've had to use Endo as like a make weight, does not set like the transfer plan back because this summer was meant to be the rebuild at the back. You've had the forward line get reshuffled a bit, then you had midfield last summer, and then
not really because last season don't forget they did buy 3 midfielders, so that was the main midfield overhaul to a degree. This is just one, but no one's talking about any other position in midfield apart from this one. No one's thinking, we need an attacking midfielder, we need a box-to-box midfielder, we need a kind of creative midfielder. There's no suggestion of any of that. They just know that this is the one that they need, and Liverpool have known that from the start of the summer. I mean, it's interesting because over the course of the last 2 months, I've written, the defensive midfielder isn't a priority, and the centre-back isn't a priority, and a winger isn't a priority, and got a little bit of grief on social media saying, but what is the priority? Well, the point was, obviously, the priority was looking at the squad, which is exactly what they said would happen, and it has happened. Now is when it becomes interesting.
And do you feel like these few weeks have been important for the players who maybe had to stake the claim, and before the rest of the squad comes back, then the sort of window of opportunity becomes a bit smaller then, doesn't it?
Well, this is part of the reason why they're having to assess the squad. Like, Alexander-Arnold, Van Dijk, Salah, Alisson Becker, they're all going to be your starting 11 players if they're fit, if they're available, they're still at the club. And then it's just who is going to take the rest of the places in the squad. Like, if Tyler Morton, Fabio Carvalho came in and actually had a stormer, then maybe you don't need a midfielder or another forward because they're options. But if they're just like squad players still, it's like, well, you're not going to keep all of them because they're not going to be playing football. It's just too many players. So it's them making those decisions. Like we're seeing this ongoing situation with Sepp Vandenberg as well, where he's playing games at the moment. He's starting at centre-back and he's speaking about how he wants to be playing football and he's happy at the moment because he is playing. But Konate's back this week. Gomez and Van Dijk are back next week. Is he going to be starting games next week? And then further on. So it's all spinning plates, waiting to see what happens. There is opportunities for these players who are already back to state the claim and say why they should be part of the squad because so many senior players are coming back, but it's still very limited spaces there because Liverpool have got an elite squad. They've got some really, really world-class players, and that's something else the head coach and the sporting director have said all along, and it's something Jurgen Klopp was saying last year as well. It doesn't need too much doing to it. Like we can look at positions like centre-back, holding midfield, a left winger, a right winger, and for the majority of them, it will take maybe someone to move on to bring someone else in and improve that. And that's not a case of they're needing to raise funds to bring in players. It's a case of, well, you're not going to sign a goalkeeper unless Kelleher's moving on. You're not going to sign a new left forward unless Diaz is moving on. It's just waiting to see what's happening with your current players and then improving on it if things develop.
And Ian, do you think it was always, well, when we started the transfer window, the focus was on incomings, and you never thought a potential outgoing would be the biggest story of the transfer window so far? Do you think that probably could be the domino faller for the rest of what could happen in terms of the squad now?
I mean, I quite like the fact you call me Ian. No one ever calls me Ian. So credit to you there. You get a bonus point. So, yeah, it's basically what I said before. I said I think it's just going to be the start. This is what I mentioned in the piece. I do think that the hand has been shown a little bit. My reading of the situation, having done this job for quite some time, is that people don't bid for players unless you think you've got a genuine chance of getting them, or if they're available, basically. And obviously, the Marseille manager is Roberto De Zerbi, so he knows a lot about Endo, who come up against him last season. So I do think that Liverpool must surely be looking around for a defensive midfielder, and I think that the words got back to Marseille, and they thought, well, we could help a little bit here by signing one of your players. But at the moment, there's no way Liverpool will sell Endo. And as I said before, if I was in charge of things, if they don't need to sell him, I wouldn't, because I still think he's got, as Theo said, he's got a job to do this season.
And in terms of outgoings, there's quite some potential. It's quite telling comments from Fabio Carvalho this weekend, wasn't there, where he says he thinks his best position is the number 10 or the attacking midfield, whatever you want to call it, and then he's basically alluded Slot's trying to push him out on that left, and it's basically an embarrassment of riches on that left side.
That's the thing, is that they didn't have any strikers for the Betis game. They played two number 10s, and Carvalho still wasn't one of them. Jurgen Klopp didn't really play with a number 10 often, certainly not during the last couple of years when Carvalho was there. Now we know Slot likes to try things. He's been quite pains, wasn't he, when he first came and said, I'm a little bit not upset or sad or whatever, wasn't it, that people think I play this formation or this one. He says he likes to think he's got a bit of tactical variety, or variation, I should say. And I think...
Two number 10s was definitely varied.
Exactly, yeah. Well, you got no strikers, yeah, what can you do? So I do think you've seen him on the touchline, haven't you, with his little tactics board. You never ever saw Jurgen doing that, did you? So,
even involved in the training videos, he seems well amongst it.
Well, that's it. He's more hands-on, isn't he, than Jurgen Klopp. And it's just different styles for different managers. And I think if you are going to implement a new system, it's great if you're the person who knows all about it and you're the one who can put across the ideas, one-to-one. So, yeah, going back to Carvalho, if he's not getting in at number 10 in those games, and the left wingers, we know that Gakpo, Diaz, Jota can play there as well, although he tends not to anymore that much. I just can't see where he's getting in the team, so I'd be surprised if he's still there on August the 31st, because I suspect he'll be out on loan again. As we saw last year, he went for a big loan to the Bundesliga with Leipzig, didn't really work out, stepped down a rung to go to Hull, did a lot better, so... What's his level? We don't really know yet, do we?
And did an element of feeling sorry for him, because obviously he came with such a high bill, and Liverpool went through the mill to try and get him, and it's almost been a sorry situation for him when he came with so much expectation, and he just can't find that right position for him. It almost looks likely that he is going to new pastures.
Well, he did start well when he came to Liverpool. He got those couple of early goals, didn't he, against Newcastle and Bournemouth, had a good pre-season. And then it came into a team that wasn't in form. And we've seen that players before when maybe the team weren't quite as out of form, but when games weren't positioned well enough for you to make those changes, to try different things, to give players opportunities. And it's like, well, you're not going to turn to him on the left wing because he's not a left winger. He's still finding his feet. They tried him as a number 8 in a couple of games. He's not a deeper midfielder, is he? He is a number 10. I think he was false 9 in a couple of games, but he's still a very slight player. So he can get bullied a bit against Premier League centre-backs. It's about finding that right position. And whereas, take Harvey Elliott, for example, he was signed as a right winger. They transformed him into this more of a deeper midfielder, and he really thrived in it. It's worked with Carvalho. Whenever you hear from him, it's still, I'm a number 10. I want to play number 10. Obviously, he's a bit older when he came in. He's got more experience in that position. It's what he's comfortable with. And while those are the sound bites that have leapt out from this, he did still say he's going to listen to what the manager said, take it on board, and try and do what he wants on the left. But then, as I've already mentioned, the competition there, he's not playing left wing. There's not a chance. His best chance would be to be on the right wing and be an understudy to Mohamed Salah, be that alternative there. And he's just not getting that chance. Like, if they're not got a forward at the moment, he could have been up front against Real Betis and they didn't consider it. It's just, he doesn't quite seem to have a place in this Liverpool squad. Maybe it was like when they signed Solanke. It's a really talented young player. They can get free transfer compensation, give him good experience, and then get that asking price up, do well on loan or whatever, or just being part of your squad, and then you sell him for a big profit 2-3 years down the line. But yeah, Carvalho's got to find that level. If he is adamant he's a number 10, it's hard to see him having a future at Liverpool. But then go and get a Premier League loan or something and do it elsewhere.
And I'm very much outgoing here, Ian, but Ben Doak, another one who's attracted interest, possibly on the other end of the scale in terms of his career, and he's sort of needs a bit more first team football. He showed flashes being a youngster coming on for Liverpool, but very much needs like a Harvey Elliott loan to Blackburn, doesn't he?
Yeah, he didn't get much chance last year because of just the way the season went. He obviously got injured for the second half of it, but during the first half he had injuries, which meant he was on the bench, which meant he couldn't play the under-21s, which meant he missed out on loads and loads of development in terms of playing time. So he does need games. It was at Leicester and Southampton looking at him. It's interesting. Would he get the minutes there? Because it's such a big, it's a big leap, isn't it? I mean, I'd have thought possibly the Championship would have been.
It's unheard of when you see a Liverpool player go from like a Premier League to a Premier League club in terms of the loans.
Like Minamino, was he the last one? Maybe. He went Southampton, didn't he?
Oh yeah, I completely forgot about that. Was Southampton in the Premier League then?
Yeah. Second half of 21-22, or was it 20? No, 2021 wasn't it? The year before.
That's right, yeah, because he made quite a few appearances, didn't he, the following season for Liverpool. So yes, I do think that would be unusual, but not, it's an unusual situation for Doak. So again, he's another one I'd be surprised he's still there August 31st. I think he needs to be playing, and I don't think he'll necessarily be playing quite as much as he should be. I mean, it might be different for someone like Kay Gordon. I don't think they're going to send them both out on loan. That's just my guess, because they're both playing basically the same position on the right wing. They've both got the kind of same profile, and Liverpool do need a bit of competition, or certainly backup. And I think for League Cup games, possibly even just coming off the bench in Premier League as well, they could offer an option. Whereas I think Doak is far more in need of immediate minutes than Gordon is. So possibly keep Gordon for the first 6 months of the season, see how it goes.
Would you do another Premier League or send him to another Premier League club then, Theo? In terms, like we said there, where you can just get, especially with Carvalho, he's gone to a decent level to go to on a loan and didn't really come to fruition.
He just needs the game time. As Doyle referenced there, he didn't play enough last year because he was in the first team squad. They needed him on the bench, or as the extra man, he wasn't getting minutes. And while it was supposed to be the era he really pushed on, that lack of game time hurt him. Like, he was still very raw. We know he's quick. We know he can beat a man, but it's about getting that final ball right to get the assists and the goals at the senior level. And we've seen him do it time and time again, youth level, but it's about making that next step up. And he finds 21s football too easy, let's be honest. And it's not worth it for him to be kept back, be with the 21s, play in the UEFA Youth League, which I'm assuming he's still young enough to be part of, because you forget how young he is. So it is about finding that next step. So if there's a Premier League team that can give him game time and he's not just going to be on the bench, by all means, go for it. But if not, they need to get somewhere where he can do what Elliott did with Blackburn and play like 40-plus games. And if that's at the Championship or it's abroad, so be it. Like, you've got Pep Linders there at Salzburg. If you want to give him a good European loan, it's just what's best for him, because he needs minutes at a good level so that he can come back to Liverpool. At Kay Gordon, he's a bit older. While he's come back from injury as well, it's that longer one. And it's like, it's a make or break for him in terms of, are you going to be good enough for Liverpool, or are you going to be on the fringes a little bit and then move on? Whereas Doak, there's that real hype about him being that much younger, so you can loan him out, let him get that experience elsewhere before bringing him back. It does seem to make more sense at the moment to have Gordon as the understudy and then reassess your options maybe in January if it's a half-season loan, or if you've got a call back on it, and then go again.
And another one on a youngster, 17-year-old Trey Nyoni. He's a sort of rose. You see snippets from the 21s and the 18s. But,
or you go to the games and watch them yourself.
Yeah, if the road allows. But with the cameo against Real Betis, he's obviously earned a lot of praise from that, and it's what you obviously seen glimpses of the game. Is it something to be?
Is it a cameo? Like, I
It's
know
not really
He
a
played
cameo.
for 45 minutes.
yeah, I'd
didn't
say
he?
that's longer than a cameo.
Well, I don't know.
We're playing the lines here, really, aren't we?
Yeah.
Especially with pre-season. But anyway, how he was, it sort of sparked a lot of excitement on social media, hasn't it?
Well, it's like anything, isn't it? It's like if a lot of them won't have seen him play before and gone, "Who's this? Oh, he looks quite good," So, I've seen him quite a fair bit since he arrived. He's not even been at Liverpool 12 months, has he?
No.
Came from Leicester. Stuck around in the under-18s for about 4 games. Scored 3 goals, including the winner in a mini derby. They got an assist in another game. Then went up to the 21s, and he's kind of been forging his way there. And what thing's been interesting is that we didn't see the Preston game behind closed doors, but I was speaking to some people who were able to watch it. They work for Liverpool, and they said he looked impressive in the second half when he played. And then we saw that against Betis. He obviously was pushed on a little bit earlier than he would otherwise have been because of the injury to Curtis Jones. But he also played in a deeper midfield role, which is we saw his ability to put the ball through the lines, as is said these days, breaking the lines with his passes, and that's how Liverpool got the
Progressive
goal.
passes,
Yeah, exactly. Progressive. He's good at the. I wonder what percentage? What is it?
Percentile.
Percentile of the quartet of the.
I think that's for a Wednesday and
exactly,
Analysing Anfield podcast. I think.
That's the one. Anyway, but you saw that with the goal. Played it up to Szoboszlai, then 1-2 with Salah. It's in. Szoboszlai was speaking after the game, and he said that he was sat on the bench next to Gerald Quanton. He said, they couldn't get the ball off him. Just the way that he is that he's just, you couldn't foul him because he just was able to just slink away, and he's obviously very slight physically. Just recently to 17, that's understandable, really. So whether he fills out or not, it depends on which way Liverpool and he decide to go in terms of his physical attributes, because football's not quite the rough and tumble game it is now as it was when I were a lad, right?
Or how I still play it.
Yeah. So it is still a physical game, so he's still going to have to build himself up. But you've seen the signs; he can certainly play. His technical ability is all there. I do like the way that he can turn in possession. I do like the way he moves away from players. And at the under-21s this season, he obviously was playing a defensive midfield, or one of the two, against Betis. He's played box-to-box. He's played advanced midfield for the under-21s. And when they got beat in the playoffs by Tottenham last game of last season, he actually played as a false number 9. Now, obviously, it was Liverpool that day were a little bit like they were against Betis, where they didn't have any forwards because people were injured and unavailable. But it just goes to show that you've got this lad who's still only 17, is able to do all of that.
He's been on the first team for a while.
And don't forget, he's also played for the first team. He played 12 minutes, I think it was, against Southampton in the FA Cup. And
got his first winners' medal.
Before he'd even played, a couple of days before. So that just doesn't happen by accident. There are very few players that happens to. So Slot said after the game, the head coach said after the game, that he's an interesting player, but we're not going to rush him, and I don't see any reason why they should. I do think we'll see him play a couple of games for the first team this season, but most of the time we're playing for the 21s. And in the UEFA Youth League, which obviously Liverpool being back in it, so we haven't qualified for the Champions League, it'll be very interesting to see how he goes in that, because I think he could end up being one of the best players in the competition.
Curtis Jones, wasn't he? He had his breakthrough there when he was like 19, playing on the left wing.
That'll be interesting.
It's also worth remembering with these younger players, majority of them, they've been signed when they're 15, 16 from other clubs. It's not as though you're making the best of what's coming through. Like Liverpool have got a couple of them, like Adanza or Kwanzaa, really good talents that have come all the way through the ranks recently. But if you think of Basetic, Nyoni, Nallo, who we've not seen yet, but he's part of this squad as well, Ben Doak, Kay Gordon, they've all been snapped up from clubs because they are standout players in their age group. They're doing the same thing with the lad they're getting from Chelsea. They've obviously got a bit about them. They're some of the best players in those age groups, which is why Liverpool want him in the first place. And this is why Liverpool have been, since Brexit, they've been masters of that transfer, really, getting the really good talents in. So it shouldn't be a surprise when, within 6 months, they are getting that first taste of first-team football. It's part of the reason why they're coming to the club in the first place, because they get that opportunities. And when they get the opportunity, they take it because they were that good to get the move in the first place.
And yeah, like I was saying to Ian, he has been in and around the first team more or less since he's came in. He's obviously had a few weeks with the 18s and 21s, but before long he was like, who's this? He was with the first team. Like, he has got something about him, and like you said, Liverpool have been masters in this sort of domestic academy market, and if you're getting compliments off your fellow pros, someone like Dominic Szoboszlai, who only a few weeks ago was the youngest ever captain at a European Championships, it does show that Liverpool do have a player in their hands, doesn't it? Without, well, obviously a caution and a realism there, that it was only Real Betis in a pre-season friendly.
Only Real Betis. I thought they were a pretty good La Liga team, aren't
Well,
they?
Yeah, come on.
Me and all my credentials, I say so.
Exactly, yeah.
It's a good showing from him pre-season, but he's got to build on it now. I believe Doyley's written a piece on this recently, like Ben Woodburn as the example, how it's all very well doing it in pre-season, but it's then making that step up into first team level. And all the players that have made that impact, it's then all very well doing it in the League Cup, FA Cup, then go and do it in the Premier League, then go and do it in the Champions League. I'd imagine this season might get a start in the League Cup or get a good couple of appearances off the bench in those cup competitions, and then if he's really coming on leaps and bounds, then he gets that opportunity in the Champions League when they're like 3-0 up in one game, or they're already through with a couple of games to spare. It's that gradual process, and you've seen a number of players take those steps, like Bradley, like Kwanzaa, like Basetic. If he keeps on like this, he could be one of the next ones, but there's so many of them we can say could be the next one. Like, they've got a lot of talent in that group.
It's interesting where John Achterberg did a podcast, I think it was the Football Historian podcast, was it? Yeah. And he said...
Are we allowed to do that in this podcast?
He said, oh, sorry.
We're allowed to share other podcasts, are we?
One podcast family.
Yeah. The wider remit
Yeah.
of the footballing podcasts. After all, some of our regulars appear, not you, but appear on the podcast anyway, don't they? Yeah, tut. And get paid for it as well. Can you believe that? Anyway, so...
Put my email in the box below.
Yeah. What was the question? Oh, yeah. So basically, yeah, you get a lot of youngsters come through. As I said, I wrote it last week, and, written it every year, basically, for the past 20 years, is that, okay, just because you made a couple of appearances. And I think the players aren't soft, but then at that age, they're still allowed to dream about what they want to be. They can still, for the first couple of years when they get in and around that squad, they will dream about that and they'll want it, and that's what they think they can do. It's only when they get a little bit older when they realise, well, actually, maybe this isn't the level I can get at. And going back to what I was actually going to say about John Achterberg, is that he said, dealing with the goalkeepers, is that just because players haven't necessarily come through and played for Liverpool, he and the goalkeeping staff have been proud that there's certain players who have gone off and had a career elsewhere. Galaxy, I think, is... I think it's a bit before Achterberg's time. I know he
would have been like academy goalkeeper. He's that transition.
You look at
Danny Ward.
Danny Ward. You mentioned him. Grabara as well. He's another one who's gone on. And
would Martin Hansen have been one? Like, there was a few, weren't there, early on?
There's a few, but again, that's the same for the people who work at the academy. So with the players who've come through from a very young age, it is different, as Theo said, that Liverpool have been buying up players. You look at Bobby Clark. Basetic was the last one before the Brexit rules kicked in, wasn't he?
It was like the day before, wasn't it?
Said Bobby Clark. Kay Gordon is another one. Ben Doak, he's another one. And
clubs have been doing it for years, really, haven't
Scanlon,
they?
Scanlon.
Players like that. So they have been doing it for a while. Amara Nallo's done very well. Again, he's another one who came in round about on the same day as Nyoni, and you think he was in a first team squad and didn't get on the bench.
He might have been on the bench against Southampton
a couple of times, actually. Yeah. But he's done really well for the 21s as well.
He's the next centre back in the pecking order. So say Vandenberg got sold, he'd be the one stepping up, wouldn't he?
Yeah. So I mean, there are the players that they'll get an opportunity, but it's not just about whether they're good enough. They also need circumstances to fall in their way, such as somebody like Conor Bradley, who Trent's injury ended up finally opening up a place for him, and he took the opportunity. So you do need a little bit of luck, a lot of talent, and you need that ambition, drive, and you also need to be patient. You look at Conor Bradley, made his debut for Liverpool in September 2001 then, to 2021 at Norwich in the League Cup, when Kay Gordon and Tyler Morton also played. And look, all three of them are still there in the squad 3 years later. One of them is argues a fully fledged Liverpool player in Bradley. Another one has certainly proved himself to be championship level player in Tyler Morton. And only injuries stopped Kay Gordon doing either one of those two things.
It's all timing, isn't it? Like Nico Williams coming through, he was never getting past Trent. Whereas you see Conor Bradley's probably a bit better. He's got more of an opening because there's those conversations about what is Trent's long-term position. In goal, you can say the same thing with Kelleher. Granted, he's not first choice, but he's still had a much more of a look-in than a Danny Ward got. But then the next goalkeeper coming through will get more of a look-in than Kelleher, because that will be like the succession for Alisson. It's about getting that opportunity and making the most of it. but it's also when that opportunity is opening up to state your claim place on the team, or if it's just to be a squad player.
Then you look at Nico Williams. I think Liverpool sold him for, I want to say 17 million.
Yeah,
17 million. He's played for Wales at a World Cup, European Championships, and he's a regular in the Premier League.
You see, he's been linked with Manchester United the last couple of weeks as well.
So
you know, not Bilbao.
Again, that's a sign that just because a player doesn't necessarily make it at Liverpool, they can't make it elsewhere at a very, very good level.
And just obviously backtracking and not upsetting any of our Real Betis listeners, obviously in terms of the game itself, it was a bit of an exhibition in the end, where it was basically just to throw everyone in, pretty much threadbare squads. How much can you look into these sort of games where...
I'm going to throw another question in first for our long-time listeners. How did Nabil Fekir play?
He got mentioned. That's what I'll say. I mean, to be honest, if anybody was watching it on LFC TV, I mean, I watched the first half and went to bed and then recorded the second half and watched it the following day. Right at the end of the game, they cut to a wide shot while they were waiting for them to go pitch side for the interviews, and obviously they had to wait for about 4 or 5 minutes. This wide shot, the camera was a fixed camera, and then a spider appeared on it, and all you saw for the entire time that we were talking was the spider was making a lovely web all the way through.
Oh, spider? Yeah. I thought you meant like the spider cam.
No, it's about an actual physical insect of a spider. Anyway,
how much would that be worth in the modern transfer market?
Just God knows. So yeah, Betis Fekir. No, I mean, it's the same. You don't want to get absolutely hammered. Winning by loads seems as though that of little value anyway, because that suggests that the other team haven't really, turned up for it. So you want a competitive game, and the fact that there was quite a couple of Liverpool players got booked suggests that they were taking it pretty seriously.
But in terms like you see snippets, and obviously Szoboszlai start on the left. We don't know obviously the ins and outs, and we can't look too much into it in case it's just putting a square peg in a circle round hole. Sorry, just to make.
But because there's that many players missing, I don't think you can read too much of it in terms of personnel. I'd read a bit more into it in terms of tactics. Certainly now that Jota's there, and we can see what Liverpool, how they might line up with an actual forward playing. Did
you learn anything new from the actual game itself?
Yes, actually. To be fair, I did. This isn't a joke. Oh. This will be something I'll be writing later this week. I think Jaros is very interesting, the goalkeeper Vyacheslav Jaros, because I've seen him quite a lot when he was playing for the 21s and the 18s. And when he came on for the second half, you were like, he's big. Right? And obviously he had 5-6 months at Sturm Graz towards the end, the second half of last season, where he walked straight into the team, won the League and Cup ahead of Salzburg, which I think we've mentioned, and that's probably why Linders is now at Salzburg, got into the Czech Republic European Championship team squad.
Czech,
sorry.
Yeah, come on, you're the one who's been preaching this all.
Well, it's same. This didn't say Czechoslovakia. Yeah. Got into the Czechia squad as the third goalkeeper, and he got taken so much confidence from that. I mean, I'm not quite sure what his game's like with the ball at his feet, but then we don't know what Slot wants from his goalkeepers. We always knew what Klopp wanted in the end.
I'd imagine it's quite good, though, because he is another one that has been part of the Achterberg school.
So what I'm going to say is that we already know he's basically, from what Paul Gorst wrote the other week, is that he's now regarded as the third choice. If Kelleher goes, does he go straight in as number 2? Because he would be technically an international goalkeeper who's won a league title and a cup. I mean, what more do you want? And he's only 23. Now, whether he'd want to do that, I don't know, but I would imagine he would, certainly if he could have a season as the number 2 to Alisson Becker, I think it's more likely than him being the number 3.
And Theo, in terms of the post-match reaction, maybe even the pre-match as well with Curtis Jones, there's been a lot of talk about Slot, and obviously the comparisons with his predecessor, and it's like there is obviously a marked change in terms of not gone from the gegenpress and the more possession-based. So obviously it's going to be a slight sort of mentality switch, isn't it?
Yeah, but that's always the case when you've got a new manager coming in. They've said along that while with Slot there were similarities, he's his own man as well. He's got to have a few differences, and it's about developing, isn't it? Like Liverpool have achieved so much under Jurgen Klopp, they've won every major honour, but then you're sitting back looking after it going, while they can be happy with what they've won, should they have won more? It's like tweaking what was already working, taking it to that next level, passing on the baton, and hopefully Arne Slot style does work with that. Like the players themselves, we've heard from a number of them already this summer, and they're saying it's difficult, it's a challenge, it's an adjustment, which it's always going to be after 9 years, but they're enjoying it. They're enjoying being able to be on the ball more and being in control of games more. Like we've looked at a Man City, and that's more their possession style. And when we heard early on about Slot, it was like he's more that combination of a Klopp and a Guardiola. So it's interesting to see these early signs and them quickly adjusting to it as well. Because in the past, when there's been managerial changes, Liverpool have had to start from square one again. It's been complete overhaul, going from a 4-4-2 to a 4-2-3-1, or a complete change of style. At least here, they're already on a good foot. It's just passing on the baton. It's not starting from scratch. So hopefully it means they can start the season well. Players are already adjusted. My only concern is you've got the internationals coming back, and there is a big number of your starting 11 there who haven't worked with them yet. They're going to have to get up to speed 2-3 weeks and ready to go. But then they're elite players, they're world-class players. They've been hearing good things from the ones already in pre-season. Hopefully they're raring to go, and it can be a really positive season for Liverpool.
I mean, on Thursday morning our time, Wednesday night around the world.
It's always 5 o'clock somewhere.
Yeah. Obviously see some more first teamers in that squad, or in that team at least, and obviously Slot's sort of main headache, or early headache so far. He'll be able to get a striker in that number 9 slot. No pun intended.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, correct. That's right.
So what are your thoughts going to be
We've got
then?
to work for this one, come on.
So your thoughts is going
He's
to
still
be...
chuckling his own pun.
Yeah,
He's not all a question here.
Let's clip that. Obviously, you see some more first teamers, so it'll be, in terms of the complexion of the game, there'll be a lot more sort of what we could expect to see.
Well, I mean, against Arsenal the next game, it's only Jota that's back. So I think, again, I mentioned it just before, I think that'll make a massive difference. You know, the thing about Jota is that he didn't play every game at the Euros, did he really?
Came on a couple of times, didn't he?
He hadn't played for a while before then because of injury. So I would imagine he's pretty fit and he's quite fresh and he's reasonably match sharp. So whether or not they decide, let's get an hour out of him, I don't know. I'd be surprised if they get more than 45, to be fair. But I think the point is that he's ready to go straight in. Might be a bit different. A bit later on, is it Canati and Gravenberch? I can't remember. I think it is those two are joining.
They didn't kick a ball, did they, during the
No,
Euros?
so maybe that's the same for them as well, to be fair. And it's going to have to be because, again, we've mentioned this in pods previously, is Liverpool are going to be nowhere near ready when the season starts against Ipswich. But then most of the other teams aren't. I think Ipswich might be reasonably ready because this is a massive thing for them, you know, obviously being back in the Premier League. And we saw when Liverpool went to Fulham 2 years ago, they were way off the pace and the quality ended up getting them a point. And they played Norwich as well, didn't they, opening game of the season, 2021, but 21-22 they played away 3, they won 3-0.
Yeah. Year before it was Leeds 4-3, but that was the pandemic year where it was.
But again, these were always against promoted clubs, and while that Norwich game seemed fairly straightforward, it wasn't until they scored, basically. But you'd expect that, and I think it'll be a tough game, but Liverpool are going to have to rely on some of these younger players for the first couple of games, I think, whether that's being on the bench or... Because I wouldn't be surprised if some of the ones who've come back don't necessarily get straight into the team and get told, right, you're still a game or two away.
We had that with Henderson after the last Euros. I think he was left out completely.
Well, that was the Norwich
against
game, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So that has happened, and I think Liverpool have got enough in reserve for that to happen. It will mean that there will be some players that will be needed in these opening few games.
Theo, like you mentioned about the Ipswich sort of...
I thought you were going to wrap up.
That's what I'll have to keep this rolling for another 10 minutes. Obviously, like you mentioned about Ipswich, it's not maybe just going from behind or the enemy lines type of thing. There could be an argument they might not be prepared either because they're obviously spending a lot more money to sort of make themselves accustomed to the league, but they're getting a lot of players in. So there's obviously going to be that acclimatisation period, isn't there?
There is, but Ipswich will be one of the teams that haven't been without half their squad throughout pre-season. They've had them back early, and they'll be raring to go. Like, this is an opportunity their club hasn't had for 20 years. The fan base will be loving it. That first game against one of the giants of English football at home, it's going to be a big test for Liverpool, even if they're not the names. And then they've kept the manager as well when they weren't expecting to. Well, they've got new signings in. There's going to be that adrenaline rush, isn't there? That initial honeymoon period for them going into the new season. So that's why Liverpool are going to have to be up for it. They can't be as sleepy as they were against Fulham a couple of years ago. But because we've only got that first glimpse of an Arne Slot Liverpool so far, we're not sure what we're going to expect from them. Is waiting for those players to come back. It's all going to come down to that Seville friendly when you're seeing all your internationals back. What state are they in? Can they get 45 minutes? Can they get 60 minutes? Can they even get 90 for the ones that are already there? Because it's always working up that match fitness. And when you've got some players that have been there throughout the summer, like Salah, like Harvey Elliott, Szoboszlai, they can be a big part of it. But when others come back from injury, like a Curtis Jones or whatever, or just slowly finding those minutes, it's about getting that right mix. Ipswich are a test. Liverpool can't take them for granted at all.
The injuries is interesting because obviously Curtis got one against Betis, although from what we're led to believe it's nothing massively serious. In the old days, that would mean he'd be out till Christmas. I don't know whether... It was interesting actually, wasn't it? Slot was asked about Robertson before the Betis game, and he said, he's just got a medical issue. We don't like to talk about them at this club. And it's like, well, so you're never going to tell us what any of these injuries are. So that was slightly alarming from a journalistic point of view.
Yeah, we don't talk about them.
So just players will just disappear. We'll never know what's wrong with them.
United have had that, haven't they, with the left back? Is it Malacia?
Malacia, yeah.
He's just been missing for 18 months or whatever it is, because he's not even on their tour. But this is not a Manchester United podcast, so let's go back to Liverpool.
So, yeah, basically, the injuries is interesting because I do think the way things work is there will be one or two who'll pick one up between now and the start of the season. That's just the way things are. And that Liverpool have got 3 weeks into 4 almost into pre-season. They've just had the one, because obviously Robertson's was a hangover from the Euros. That's pretty good going. Obviously things have changed in the training ground.
And that's all we've got time for this Blood Red podcast. Thank you to Ian Doyle and Theo Squires. Before we go, where can we find you on social media, Ian?
I think you'll find we have to do the Nord Person of the Week before we go.
Oh, yeah, sorry, the Nord. I almost segued it in when we were talking about the certain player.
And then you forgot about it.
Yeah. And I thought, let's save it to the end.
Who are you going for, Theo?
Trey.
I'm going to go Trey. Trey Cool.
Yeah, so that's our NordVPN Player of the Week. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you on Friday.